The morning rush at Central Station was like any other Tuesday. People hurried past with their coffee cups and briefcases, everyone focused on getting to work on time. But today, something was different. Right in the middle of the main hall, where thousands of people walked every day, stood a beautiful black piano. Alex had been walking through this station for 3 years now, ever since he started high school. He knew every corner, every shop, every shortcut to Platform 9 where he caught his train. But he had never seen anything like this before. The piano wasn't just any ordinary instrument. It was a grand piano, shiny and perfect, like something you'd see in a fancy concert hall. Next to it was a simple wooden sign that said "Play Me" in elegant letters. Around the sign, someone had written in smaller text, "Music brings people together. Share your gift with the world." Alex stopped walking and stared at the piano. His heart started beating faster. He had been playing piano since he was 7 years old, practicing every day after school in his small bedroom on an old keyboard his parents had bought from a second-hand store, but he had never played for anyone except his family. Other people walking by seemed curious too. Some stopped to take photos with their phones. Others sat on the nearby benches, probably hoping someone would start playing. A few brave souls had tried to play simple songs, but most people just looked and walked away. Alex watched as a middle-aged man approached the piano and played "Happy Birthday" with one finger. A small group of tourists clapped politely. Then a teenage girl tried to play something that sounded like a popular song, but she made several mistakes and stopped after a minute, laughing nervously. The boy felt his fingers moving slightly, as if they were already playing the keys. He had been working on a very difficult piece for months now. It was called La Campanella by Franz Liszt, and his piano teacher had told him it was one of the hardest pieces ever written. Most professional pianists struggled with it, but somehow Alex had managed to learn it. Not perfectly, but well enough that even his teacher was amazed. But playing it here, in front of hundreds of strangers, that was terrifying. Alex had always been the quiet type. In school, he preferred sitting in the back row, never raising his hand even when he knew the answer. During lunch breaks, while other students played sports or hung out in groups, he usually found a quiet corner to read or just think about music. His classmates knew he was smart, but they didn't know about his piano playing. Why would they? He never talked about it. Music was his private world, his escape from the stress of school and teenage life. When he sat at his keyboard at home, all his worries disappeared. The music carried him to a different place. But now, looking at this public piano, something stirred inside him. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way the instrument seemed to call out to him. Or maybe he was just tired of keeping his talent hidden. He noticed a group of girls from his school standing near the piano. They were probably waiting for their train too. One of them was Lily, who sat 2 seats in front of him in history class. She had long brown hair and always seemed confident when she spoke in class. Alex had noticed her before, but they had never really talked. The girls were taking selfies near the piano, laughing and having fun. Alex felt embarrassed thinking about playing while they were there. What if he made mistakes? What if they laughed at him? But then he remembered something his grandmother had told him years ago. She used to be a music teacher, and she always said, "Music is meant to be shared. When you keep it to yourself, you rob the world of something beautiful." At the time, he thought it was just something adults say to encourage kids. But standing there looking at this piano in the middle of all these busy people, he started to understand what she meant. Alex pulled out his phone and pretended to check the time, but really he was trying to calm his nerves. His train wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes. He had time. The question was, did he have courage? He watched as more people gathered around the piano area. Some were clearly hoping for entertainment while they waited for their trains. Others seemed genuinely interested in music. A few elderly people sat on nearby benches, and Alex could tell by the way they looked at the piano that they probably played music themselves when they were younger. The boy thought about his practice sessions at home. Every day after school, he would spend at least 2 hours playing. His parents sometimes complained about the noise, but they were proud of his dedication. His little sister would sometimes sit outside his room and listen, and once she told him that his music made her happy. But this was different. This wasn't his safe bedroom where only family could hear him. This was the real world, full of strangers who might judge him. Alex took a deep breath and stepped closer to the piano. The keys looked perfect, clean and white. He gently pressed middle C and the sound was beautiful. Much better than his old keyboard at home. This was a real piano, with real strings and hammers, the kind that responded to every tiny change in touch. A businessman walking by noticed Alex near the piano and smiled encouragingly. "Go ahead, son," he said. "We'd love to hear something." Alex's face turned red. Now he felt pressure to perform, but also a strange excitement. What would happen if he actually did it? What would happen if he played La Campanella right here, right now? He looked around at all the people. The girls from his school were still there, now sitting on a bench and scrolling through their phones. The elderly people were watching him hopefully. A few other teenagers had gathered nearby, probably curious to see if anything interesting would happen. Alex's hands were shaking slightly. He had performed this piece dozens of times in his bedroom. He knew every note, every difficult passage, every place where his fingers needed to move lightning fast across the keys. But could he do it here, with all these people watching? The station announcer's voice echoed through the hall. "The next train to arrive on Platform 9 will be the 4:15 service." That was his train. In 20 minutes, he would be on it, heading home. And this moment would be gone forever. He sat down on the piano bench and adjusted it to the right height. The moment he touched the keys again, something changed inside him. This wasn't just any piano. This was an instrument that wanted to be played, that was waiting for someone to bring it to life. Alex looked at his hands on the keys. These were the same hands that had practiced thousands of hours, that had struggled through difficult passages until they became second nature. These hands knew La Campanella better than he knew anything else in the world. But would he have the courage to let them play? Around him, the busy station continued its daily rhythm. People rushed past, announcements echoed overhead, and life went on as usual. But for Alex, time seemed to slow down. This felt like one of those moments that could change everything, if only he was brave enough to take the chance. He thought about all the great pianists he admired. They had all started somewhere. They had all faced their first audience, their first moment of fear and excitement. Maybe this was his moment. The girls from his school were still nearby, but they weren't really paying attention to him. Most people were focused on their own business. Maybe that was better. Maybe it would be easier to play when people weren't expecting a performance. Alex closed his eyes for a moment and imagined he was back in his bedroom, alone with his music. He thought about the piece he wanted to play, about how it started with those beautiful, delicate notes that sounded like little bells ringing in the distance. La Campanella meant the little bell in Italian, and that's exactly what it sounded like when played correctly. He had fallen in love with this piece the first time he heard it on YouTube. The way the melody danced and sparkled, the way it required both incredible technical skill and deep musical feeling. It wasn't just about playing fast or showing off. It was about creating something magical. When Alex opened his eyes again, he made a decision. Maybe not today, maybe not right now, but soon. Very soon he was going to play this piano. He was going to share his music with the world, even if it scared him. He stood up from the bench and took one last look at the instrument. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would come back with more courage and less fear. Tomorrow he would see what happened when he stopped hiding his gift. As he walked toward Platform 9, Alex felt different somehow. The piano had awakened something in him, a desire to be more than just the quiet kid in the back row. Music had always been his private joy, but maybe it was time to let others share in that joy too. Little did he know that this decision would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone who would witness what was about to happen. 3 days had passed since Alex first saw the piano at Central Station. 3 days of walking past it, looking at it, and feeling his heart race every time. Each day he told himself he would stop and play, but each day he lost his nerve and kept walking to his train. On Friday afternoon, something was different. Maybe it was because the week was almost over, or maybe because he had spent the last 3 nights practicing La Campanella even more intensely than usual. His fingers knew every note so well that he could play parts of it in his sleep. The station was busier than usual. Friday afternoon rush hour always brought crowds of people eager to start their weekend. The piano sat in its usual spot, and Alex noticed that someone had placed fresh flowers next to it. A small card read, "Thank you to everyone who shares their music with us." Alex approached the piano slowly, his backpack heavy on his shoulders. His palms were sweaty, and he could feel his heart beating in his chest. This time felt different. This time he wasn't just going to look and walk away. He sat on a nearby bench first, pretending to check his phone while actually watching the piano. A young woman was playing a gentle melody, something slow and peaceful. A few people had stopped to listen, smiling and nodding along with the music. When she finished, everyone clapped warmly, and she bowed with a big smile on her face. That's when Alex noticed them again. The same group of girls from his school, including Lily with the brown hair. They were sitting at a table in the nearby cafe, sharing a pizza and laughing about something. They seemed so confident, so comfortable in their own skin. Alex envied that confidence. He had always been the observer, never the performer. In group projects at school, he did the research while others gave the presentations. During school assemblies, he sat quietly while other students performed on stage. Even at family gatherings, when relatives asked him to play piano, he usually made excuses and avoided it. But something about this public piano was different. Maybe it was the way it invited anyone to play, without judgment or expectations. Maybe it was the way people seemed genuinely happy when someone shared music with them. Or maybe Alex was just tired of being invisible. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his mom. "Going to be a little late today. Something I need to do," she replied immediately. "Everything okay?" "Yes," he typed back. "Everything's fine. Maybe even better than fine." Alex put his phone away and walked toward the piano. His legs felt shaky, like he was walking to the edge of a cliff. The young woman had finished playing and was gathering her things. Perfect timing. As Alex approached, a businessman in an expensive suit was examining the piano. "Beautiful instrument," he said to Alex. "You play?" "A little," Alex replied, which was probably the biggest understatement of his life. "Go ahead," the man encouraged. "I'd love to hear something." Alex's mouth went dry. Now there was expectation. Now someone was actually waiting for him to perform. He could feel other people starting to notice too. A few other commuters had slowed down, sensing that something was about to happen. He sat on the bench and adjusted the height just like he did at home. But this wasn't his old keyboard. This was a real grand piano, and when he pressed the keys gently, the sound was incredible. Rich, warm, and full of life. Alex looked at his hands on the keys. These hands had been preparing for this moment for years, even though he hadn't known it at the time. Every hour of practice, every difficult passage he had mastered, every time he had played alone in his room, it had all been leading to this. He glanced around quickly. More people were gathering now, not just the businessman. The girls from his school were still at their table, but he noticed Lily looking in his direction. A few elderly people had taken seats on nearby benches. Even some of the station staff seemed to be paying attention. Alex's heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. His fingers felt cold despite the warm day. This was it. This was the moment he either did something brave or walked away forever. He thought about La Campanella, the piece that had consumed his thoughts for months. It wasn't just difficult, it was legendary. Pianists spent years trying to master it. The piece demanded everything from a performer: speed, accuracy, musical sensitivity, and incredible stamina. But Alex knew he could play it. He had played it perfectly just last night at home. But could he play it here, in front of all these people, when his hands were shaking and his mouth was dry? Alex closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He tried to transport himself back to his bedroom, back to that safe space where music flowed through him naturally. He thought about his grandmother's words, "Music is meant to be shared." When he opened his eyes, he noticed that even more people had gathered. Word was somehow spreading that something was about to happen. Maybe it was the way people had started, to form a loose circle around the piano. Or maybe it was just the energy in the air. Alex looked at the keys one more time. Middle C, his old friend. The note that started everything, the foundation of all music. He pressed it gently and the sound rang out clear and true. Then he saw something that made his heart skip. Lily had gotten up from her table and was walking toward the piano area. She wasn't looking at him directly, but she was definitely coming closer to see what was happening. This was his chance, not just to play music, but to show who he really was underneath all that shyness and fear. Alex had spent 3 years being invisible at school, 3 years of hiding his talent and passion. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. He positioned his hands over the keys for the opening of La Campanella. The piece began softly, almost mysteriously, with delicate notes that really did sound like little bells. It was a beautiful, gentle beginning that gave no hint of the incredible technical fireworks that would follow. Alex's breathing steadied. His hands felt more confident now. He had played these opening measures hundreds of times. They were part of him, encoded in his muscle memory and his soul. Around him, the station seemed to quiet down, as if the universe was holding its breath. The businessman was still there, watching with interest. The elderly people on the benches had leaned forward slightly. Even the busy commuters walking past seemed to slow down a little. And there was Lily, now standing maybe 10 feet away, her friends beside her. She was looking directly at the piano now, directly at him. For the first time in 3 years of school together, she was really seeing him. Alex felt a strange calm wash over him. This was why he had learned music in the first place. Not to impress people or show off, but because music spoke to something deep inside him. It was his language, his way of expressing feelings that words couldn't capture. He thought about all the times he had played this piece alone, imagining what it would be like to share it with others. Well, now he would find out. The moment stretched out like a held breath. Alex's hands were poised over the keys, ready to begin. Around him, people waited without knowing exactly what they were waiting for. The station continued its busy rhythm, but in this small space around the piano, time seemed to slow down. This was it, the moment that would either change everything or leave him with regret for the rest of his life. Alex had spent 3 days building up to this moment, and now it was here. He looked once more at the keys, at his hands, at the small crowd that had gathered. Then he looked up at Lily, who was watching with curious, kind eyes. Maybe she would finally see who he really was. Maybe they all would. Alex took one final breath, let all his fear and nervousness flow out of him, and prepared to play the most important performance of his young life. The station held its breath, the piano waited patiently, and Alex, the quiet boy who had spent years hiding his light under a bushel, was about to let that light shine brighter than anyone had ever imagined possible. All those hours of practice, all those moments of doubt, all those dreams of sharing his music with the world, everything had led to this single precious moment of courage. The first note rang out like a crystal bell in the vast space of Central Station, pure, clear, and perfect. Alex's finger had found its mark on the high register of the piano, and suddenly, the entire world seemed to change. La Campanella began, the way it always did, softly, mysteriously, like distant church bells calling across a valley. But there was something different about hearing it in this huge, echoing station. The sound seemed to bounce off the high ceilings and wrap around every person in the space. Alex's nervousness melted away the moment his fingers touched the keys. This was his element, his natural habitat. All the fear and anxiety that had built up over the past 3 days disappeared, replaced by pure musical instinct. The opening melody was deceptively simple, gentle, sweet notes that sounded almost innocent. People walking by began to slow down, drawn by the beauty of the sound. But Alex knew what was coming. In about 30 seconds, this quiet little melody would explode into one of the most difficult pieces of music ever written. He could see more. People gathering now. The businessman who had encouraged him was still there, now joined by several others. Lily and her friends had moved even closer, standing maybe 6 feet from the piano. Other commuters were setting down their bags and briefcases, sensing that something special was about to happen. The melody continued to dance through the upper register of the piano. Alex's right hand moved gracefully across the keys, while his left hand provided gentle support underneath. To most people, it probably sounded like a pretty simple tune. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Alex felt completely calm now. This was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was born to do. Every note flowed naturally, from his fingers, as if the music was playing itself and he was just the instrument. Then came the moment that changed everything. The gentle melody suddenly transformed into a cascade of lightning-fast notes that seemed to pour from the piano. Like water from a broken dam, Alex's fingers began moving at incredible speed, playing scales and arpeggios that most people couldn't even follow with their eyes. The effect on the crowd was immediate and dramatic. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People who had been walking passed frozen place. Even the busy coffee shop nearby went quiet as customers and workers turned to see where this incredible music was coming from. Lily's mouth fell open. She had sat behind Alex in history class for months, thinking of him as just another quiet student. She had no idea that inside this shy, reserved boy was a musical genius, capable of performing at a professional level. The technical demands of La Campanella were staggering. Alex's right hand was flying across the keys in patterns that looked impossible, while his left hand jumped back and forth across the lower registers, providing the rhythm and harmony that held the whole piece together. It wasn't just fast. It was precise, musical, and emotionally compelling. More people continued to gather. Word was spreading through the station that something extraordinary was happening. Business people set down their phones. Teenagers stopped scrolling through social media. Even the usually grumpy station security guard was standing nearby, listening with amazement. Alex was completely lost in the music now. The world around him had faded away, and there was nothing but the piano and the notes flowing through him. This was what he lived for, this feeling of perfect connection between his mind, his hands, and the instrument. The piece demanded everything from him. There were sections where his hands had to move in completely different patterns at the same time, like having 2 separate conversations simultaneously. There were moments where he had to play so fast that individual notes blurred together into shimmering streams of sound. And through it all, he had to maintain the musical line, the emotional core that made La Campanella more than just a technical exercise. About 2 minutes into the performance, something magical began to happen. The small crowd that had gathered around the piano started to grow into something much larger. People on the upper level of the station were looking down over the railings. Commuters who had been heading to distant platforms were turning around and walking back to see what was causing all the commotion. The sound of the piano seemed to fill every corner of the vast station. Unlike recorded music played through speakers, this was live acoustic sound that touched people in a way that electronic music never could. Every note had depth and dimension, colors and textures that you could only get from a real instrument played by real hands. Alex reached the most difficult section of the piece, a passage that required him to play melody and accompaniment simultaneously, while his hands crossed over each other in complex patterns. His left hand was jumping up to play high notes while his right hand dove down to play lower ones, all while maintaining the breakneck speed that the piece demanded. To the crowd, it looked like magic. How could 2 hands possibly do so many things at once? How could someone so young play with such maturity and confidence? How could music this complex sound so effortless? But to Alex, it felt as natural as breathing. This was the result of thousands of hours of practice, of working through difficult passages note by note until they became automatic. All those lonely afternoons in his bedroom, struggling with complicated fingerings and rhythms, had been preparing him for this moment. The crowd continued to grow. By now there were easily 50 people gathered around the piano, and more arriving every minute. Someone had started recording with their phone, then another person, then several more. But Alex was completely unaware of the cameras. He was inside. The music, riding the wave of sound that he was creating. Lily found herself moving even closer to the piano. She had never been particularly interested in classical music, but there was something about this performance that was absolutely captivating. The music wasn't just technically impressive. It was emotionally powerful, telling a story without words. Other students from their school had appeared in the crowd. Word was somehow spreading that the quiet kid from their classes was performing, like a concert pianist in the middle of the train station. Some of them pulled out their phones to record, while others just stood and listened in amazement. The elderly people who had been sitting on the benches were clearly moved by the performance. One woman had tears in her eyes. A man who looked like he might be a musician himself was nodding along with the rhythm, clearly appreciating the technical skill on display. As Alex moved into the final section of the piece, the music became even more intense. The notes seemed to rain down from the piano in sheets of sound. His hands were moving so fast they were almost a blur, but somehow every note was clear and precise. The station had essentially come to a standstill. Even the announcements seemed quieter, as if the universe didn't want to interrupt this magical moment. Hundreds of people were now gathered around the piano, creating a huge circle of listeners that stretched back into the concourse. Alex could feel the energy from the crowd, even though he wasn't looking at them. There was a kind of electricity in the air, the feeling that everyone present was witnessing something special. This wasn't just a performance. It was a shared experience that was touching everyone who heard it. The piece was nearing its climax now. The final section of La Campanella was like a musical fireworks display, with cascades of notes that seemed to sparkle and dance in the air. Alex's entire body was involved in the performance, his hands, his arms, his shoulders, all working together to create this incredible sound. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the piece was over. The final notes hung in the air for a moment, echoing off the high ceilings of the station, and then faded into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence was so complete that you could hear the distant rumble of trains and the hum of the air conditioning. Alex sat at the piano, his hands still on the keys, hardly believing what had just happened. Then the applause began. It started, with one person clapping, then another. Then suddenly the entire crowd erupted in the loudest, most enthusiastic applause Alex had ever heard. People were cheering, whistling, shouting, "Bravo!" The sound echoed through the station like thunder. Alex looked up for the first time since he had started playing, and his jaw dropped. There had to be 200 people gathered around the piano. The entire central area of the station was packed with listeners, and more people were still arriving, drawn by the applause. Lily was right there in front, clapping with tears streaming down her face. Their eyes met for a moment, and she mouthed the word incredible. Other students from school were looking at him like they were seeing him for the first time. The applause continued for what felt like forever. People were taking photos and videos, not just of Alex, but of the entire scene. This quiet Friday afternoon in Central Station had been transformed into something that nobody would ever forget. Alex finally stood up from the piano bench, his legs a little shaky from the adrenaline. The crowd was still applauding, and several people were calling out compliments and requests for more music. In that moment, Alex realized that everything had changed. He wasn't the invisible boy anymore. He had shared his gift with the world, and the world had responded with pure joy and appreciation. This was just the beginning. The applause seemed to go on forever, but eventually it began to fade as reality set in. Alex stood beside the piano, still trying to process what had just happened. His heart was pounding, but now it was from excitement rather than fear. The overwhelming response from the crowd had caught him completely off guard. As the clapping died down, people began approaching him. The first was the businessman who had encouraged him to play in the first place. His face was beaming with amazement. "Son, that was absolutely incredible," he said, extending his hand. "I'm a music professor at the university, and I have to tell you, I've rarely heard La Campanella played with such skill and emotion, even by graduate students. Alex shook his hand, still feeling surreal about the whole situation. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice a little hoarse from the adrenaline. But before he could say more, other people were surrounding him. An elderly woman with kind eyes approached next. "Young man, I taught piano for 40 years before I retired," she said, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. "What you just did, and that was pure magic. You have a gift that comes along maybe once in a generation." Alex felt his cheeks burning with embarrassment and pride at the same time. He had never received this kind of praise before, and it was overwhelming. At home, his family appreciated his playing, but they weren't musicians. They didn't really understand what he was capable of. Then he noticed Lily approaching, and his heart skipped a beat. She had been crying during the performance, and her eyes were still a little red, but she was smiling the biggest smile he had ever seen. "Alex," she said, and the fact that she remembered his name surprised him. "I had no idea. I sit behind you in history class every day, and I never imagined. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." For a moment, Alex couldn't find any words. This was the girl he had noticed for 3 years but never had the courage to talk to, and now she was standing right in front of him, looking at him like he was some kind of celebrity. Thank you," he finally managed. "I never thought I'd actually do it. Play in public, I mean." "Well, I'm so glad you did," Lily said. "Seriously, you made my whole month, maybe my whole year." Other students from their school had gathered, around too. Kids who had never given Alex a second glance were now looking at him with respect and curiosity. "Dude, where did you learn to play like that?" asked Jake, a guy from his math class who usually hung out with the popular crowd. "I've been practicing for years," Alex said simply. "Just at home, mostly." "That was professional level," said Amy, another classmate. "Like you could be on stage at Lincoln Center or something." The attention was both thrilling and terrifying. Alex had spent so long being invisible that he wasn't sure how to handle being the center of attention. But there was something wonderful about finally being seen, really seen, for who he truly was. More people continued to approach. A woman in her 30s introduced herself as a music blogger who covered classical performances in the city. She asked if she could interview him and take some photos. A couple of other teenagers asked if he taught lessons. Even some of the station workers came over to congratulate him. But then something happened that would change everything even more dramatically. A man in a well-tailored suit, probably in his 50s, had been standing at the edge of the crowd during the entire performance. Unlike the others, he hadn't been clapping or taking videos. He had just been listening with intense concentration. Now he approached Alex with a serious but kind expression. "Excuse me," he said politely. "My name is Robert Chen, and I'm the artistic director for the City Symphony Orchestra. I happened to be passing through the station when I heard your performance." Alex felt his knees go weak. The City Symphony was one of the most prestigious orchestras in the region. He had listened to their recordings countless times. "I have to tell you," Mr. Chen continued, "in 30 years of professional music, I have rarely heard anyone play La Campanella with such technical mastery and musical maturity, especially someone so young." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "I would very much like to discuss some opportunities with you and your family. We have a young artist program that might be perfect for someone with your abilities." Alex took the card with trembling hands. This couldn't be real. An hour ago, he was just the quiet kid who sat in the back of the classroom. Now a symphony director was offering him opportunities? Are you serious?" Alex asked. Mr. Chen smiled. "Very serious. Would it be possible to arrange a meeting with your parents? I think we should discuss your musical future." Meanwhile, the crowd was still buzzing with energy. People were showing each other the videos they had recorded, and Alex could hear fragments of conversation as people discussed what they had just witnessed. "Did you see how fast his fingers were moving? I got the whole thing on video. This is definitely going online. That kid goes to my daughter's school. She's going to freak out when she sees this." Lily was still standing nearby, and she had heard the conversation with Mr. Chen. Her eyes were wide with excitement. "Alex, this is incredible," she said. "You're going to be famous." The word famous made Alex feel a little nervous. He hadn't played the piano to become famous. He had done it because music was part of his soul and because he was tired of hiding who he really was. But he was starting to realize that his impromptu performance might have consequences he hadn't expected. More people were arriving in the area, drawn by the crowds and the excitement. Someone had apparently posted a video on social media already, because several people were showing up who hadn't been there for the original performance but had seen it online. A teenager with her phone out approached Alex. "Are you the piano guy from the video? Can I get a selfie with you?" Alex looked around, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. The station area was more crowded than he had ever seen it, and it was all because of his 5-minute performance. People were still taking photos and videos, and several more had asked for his contact information or wanted to know where he studied music. "I think I need some air," he said to Lily, who immediately understood. "Come on," she said. "Let's go sit down somewhere, quieter." She led him away from the crowd to a less busy area of the station. As they walked, Alex noticed that people were still looking at him and pointing. Word was spreading fast that the piano kid was still in the station. "Are you okay?" Lily asked once they had found a quiet bench. Alex sat down and took a deep breath. "I think so. It's just, I wasn't expecting all of this. I just wanted to play the piano." "Well, you definitely did that," Lily said with a laugh. "Alex, what you did back there was amazing. I mean, I knew you were smart and everything, but I had no idea you were so talented." For the first time in his life, Alex felt truly seen. Not just by Lily, but by everyone who had listened to his music. For years, he had felt like he was living a double life: the quiet student at school and the passionate musician at home. Now, for the first time, those two parts of himself had come together. "I've been playing piano since I was little," he said. "It's always been the most important thing to me, but I never had the courage to share it with anyone." "Well, I'm really glad you finally did," Lily said. "Seriously, Alex, you have an incredible gift. That music, it made me feel things I didn't even know I could feel." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the crowds of people still gathered around the piano area. Even though Alex wasn't playing anymore, the energy in the station felt different. It was like his performance had changed the entire atmosphere of the place. Alex looked at the business card Mr. Chen had given him. This was real, a professional opportunity, a chance to take his music to the next level, but it was also terrifying. Playing in his bedroom was one thing. Playing for a symphony orchestra was something entirely different. His phone buzzed with a text from his mom. "How was school today?" Alex looked at the message and laughed. How was he supposed to answer that? "Well, Mom, I played piano in front of 200 strangers and now a symphony director wants to meet with you." Instead, he wrote back, "Interesting day. I'll tell you all about it when I get home." As he was putting his phone away, he noticed that the crowd around the piano was finally starting to disperse. People were checking their watches and remembering that they had trains to catch. But the energy remained. You could see it in the way people were talking to each other, the way they kept looking back at the piano with smiles on their faces. Alex realized that he had given all those people something special. For 5 minutes, he had transformed their ordinary Friday afternoon commute into something magical. He had brought beauty into their busy lives, and that felt like the most important thing he had ever done. "I should probably head home," he said, to Lily. "My parents are going to wonder why I'm so late." "Of course," she said. "But Alex, I hope this doesn't mean you're going back to being the quiet guy who sits in the back row. After today, I think a lot of people would love to get to know the real you." As they walked back toward the platforms, Alex felt like he was walking into a completely new life. The boy who had approached the piano an hour ago had been scared and uncertain. The boy walking away was still a little scared, but he was also excited about possibilities he had never imagined. The weekend after Alex's performance at Central Station turned out to be unlike any weekend he had ever experienced. When he woke up Saturday morning, he had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages on his phone. His first thought, was that something terrible had happened, but as he read through the messages, he realized something incredible had happened instead. The videos of his performance had exploded across social media overnight. By Saturday morning, the main video had over 50,000 views and was still climbing rapidly. People were sharing it on every platform imaginable, and the comments were overwhelmingly positive. "This kid is unreal," read one comment. "I've been playing piano for 20 years and I can't even dream of playing like this," another said. "I was there." The whole station went completely silent. It was like magic. But the comment that meant the most to Alex came from someone who wrote, "I was having the worst day of my life when I heard this. Thank you for reminding me that there's still beauty in the world." Alex's parents were both amazed and concerned. They had always been proud of his piano playing, but they hadn't realized the level he had reached. More importantly, they hadn't expected their quiet son to suddenly become an internet sensation. "Honey, this is wonderful," his mother said as they sat around the kitchen table. "But we need to think about how to handle all this attention." His father, who worked in marketing, was more practical. "Son, you need to understand that your life might be very different from now on. Are you ready for that?" Alex wasn't sure he was ready for anything, but he knew there was no going back. The boy who had hidden his talent for years was now exposed to the world, and surprisingly, the world seemed to love what it saw. The business card from Mr. Chen, the symphony director, sat on the table between them. Alex had told his parents about the conversation, and they had already scheduled a meeting for the following week. But before that meeting could happen, other opportunities started pouring in. Local news stations called wanting to do interviews. A talent agent from Los Angeles left several voicemails. Even a representative from a major record label reached out through social media. By Sunday evening, the main video had passed $500,000 views, and new videos from different angles were appearing as people who had been there posted their own recordings. Alex found himself watching these videos over and over, still hardly believing that the person playing piano was actually him. Monday morning at school was surreal. Alex had worried that the attention might make him a target for teasing or jealousy, but instead he was greeted like a returning hero. Students he had never spoken to were congratulating him in the hallways. Teachers were pulling him aside to express their amazement, but the most meaningful moment came when Lily approached his locker before first period. "Hey, superstar," she said with a smile. "How are you handling all the fame?" "I'm not sure I am handling it," Alex admitted. "Everything feels different." "Different how?" Alex thought about it for a moment. "I guess I spent so long being invisible that I don't really know how to be visible. But also, I think I like it. For the first time in my life, people are seeing who I really am." "And who are you really?" Lily asked. "I'm someone who loves music more than anything else in the world," Alex said. "I'm someone who believes that music can change people's lives because it definitely changed mine." They walked to history class together, and for the first time, Alex didn't automatically head to the back row. Instead, he sat in the middle of the classroom, and when the teacher asked a question, he raised his hand to answer. During lunch, something unexpected happened. A group of students approached Alex's table, not to ask about his internet fame, but to ask if he would be interested in starting a music club at school. "We have some singers, a guitarist, even someone who plays violin," explained Katie, a junior he recognized but had never talked to. "But we never had anyone who could really bring us all together. After seeing what you can do, we thought maybe you'd want to help us create something special." The idea excited Alex more than any of the professional opportunities he'd received. This was a chance to share music with his peers, to help other young people discover the joy that music could bring. "I'd love to," he said without hesitation. That afternoon, Alex's meeting with Mr. Chen and his parents took place at the Symphony Hall downtown. Walking into the grand building where he had dreamed of performing someday felt like entering a cathedral dedicated to music. Mr. Chen was even more impressive in person than he had been at the station. He explained that the Symphony's Young Artist program was designed for exceptionally talented musicians who showed potential for professional careers. "Alex," he said, "what you demonstrated on Friday was remarkable, not just for your technical ability, but for your musical maturity. You didn't just play the notes of La Campanella, you told a story with them. The program would involve intensive training with professional musicians, opportunities to perform with the symphony in smaller concerts, and eventually, if Alex progressed well, the possibility of soloing with the full orchestra. However, Mr. Chen continued, this is a serious commitment. It would mean practice time beyond what you're doing now, weekend rehearsals, and a level of dedication that many young people find challenging. Alex looked at his parents, then back at Mr. Chen. Music isn't something I do, he said. It's who I am. I think I'm ready for that kind of commitment. His parents exchanged a look. They could see the determination in their son's eyes, the same focus he had shown when learning difficult pieces on his old keyboard at home. Over the following weeks, Alex's life settled into a new rhythm. The internet attention gradually calmed down, though the original video continued to gain views and comments from around the world. More importantly, Alex began to find his place in this new reality. The school music club he had joined became one of his favorite activities. Working with other young musicians reminded him why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. It wasn't about technical perfection or impressive performances. It was about connection and shared joy. His friendship with Lily deepened as well. She often came to listen when the music club practiced, and she helped him manage some of the ongoing attention from his viral performance. More than that, she helped him stay grounded in who he had always been, even as his external circumstances changed dramatically. You know what I love most about what happened at the station? She asked him one day as they walked home from school together. What's that? It wasn't about you trying to impress anyone or show off. You just shared something beautiful because you wanted to. That's the difference between performance and art. Alex thought about this comment often in the weeks that followed. As he began his training with the symphony program, as he dealt with ongoing requests for interviews and performances, and as he navigated his new status at school, he tried to remember that simple truth. The Young Artist program proved to be everything Mr. Chen had promised and more. Working with professional musicians pushed Alex to grow in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't just about playing faster or more accurately. It was about understanding music as a language that could communicate emotions and experiences that words couldn't capture. His first performance with other program participants was a small concert for symphony subscribers. As Alex walked onto the stage that evening, he thought about the journey that had brought him there. A few months ago, he had been terrified to play in front of strangers at a train station. Now he was performing in a concert hall, and it felt natural. But the most important change wasn't in his musical abilities or his performance opportunities. It was in his understanding of himself and his place in the world. Alex had discovered that hiding his gifts hadn't protected him from anything. It had only prevented him from connecting with others and sharing the joy that music brought to his life. The moment he decided to be brave at Central Station, he had opened a door to a life he had never imagined possible. As he sat at the piano that evening, preparing to perform for the symphony audience, Alex thought about all the people who had been at the station that day. He thought about the businessman who had encouraged him, the elderly woman who had cried during his performance, and especially about Lily, who had seen something in him that he hadn't seen in himself. But most of all, he thought about the music itself. The notes, rhythms, and melodies that had been his companions through all those years of solitary practice. Music had given him a voice when he thought he had nothing to say, and now it was giving him a life beyond anything he had dreamed. Alex placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The music flowed through him and out into the audience, connecting him to every person in the room. In that moment, he understood that his performance at Central Station hadn't been the end of his story as a shy, hidden teenager. It had been the beginning of his story as a musician who understood that the greatest gift you can give the world is the courage to share who you really are. The applause that followed his performance was warm and appreciative, but Alex knew that the real success wasn't measured in clapping or praise. It was measured in the connections he had made, the joy he had shared, and the example he had set for other young people who might be hiding their own gifts.